Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the weekly astrology report brought to you by Catalyst Energies. We are going to look at the astrology of today is the 10th of September. We're going to look at the astrology for the weekend, the 13th, which is Monday. We are going to have a first quarter square of our sun and moon with a T-square to Neptune. Woo, woo, woo. I'm trying to bring it, guys. I really am. And there's actually a lot to be very excited and enthusiastic about. And I know that it has been very heavy and gnarly the last couple of days, and that is not going to really stop. The moon has now moved into Scorpio. Venus is moving into Scorpio today. This is where she is at her detriment, right? She is at her least powerful in Scorpio because it is very difficult to be sensitive to the absolute depth of feeling of what comes out as a result of our relationships and our collective interaction with each other. And for better or for worse, it creates something. And it's important that we are mindful, that we are aware, that we acknowledge it, and that we're intentional about it. Otherwise, our energy and our relationships are utilized for somebody else's benefit, aren't they? So we're going to go over the astrology of the week. I've already posted the weekly astrology guide, so that's something that you can utilize just to keep you, remind you, keep it organized. You can always refer back to it. It's good to use that as a study guide, a literal study guide. Take notes, use it to review, and all right, let's get right into it. So there's a couple things I wanted to bring up just for some of the stuff that we've been talking about lately. So first of all, welcome back. If you are here on a regular basis, it's so great to have you back, of course, every day. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. And it's also great to have you here. There's been a lot of turnover lately, and so it's fresh new energy, and that's okay. One door closes, another opens, and I've been pretty vocal the last couple of days that may have turned some people off, but certainly have invited some other people in. And that's all about resonance, right? You attract to you what is resonant with you, maybe opposite, but resonant, right? That magnetic attraction is based on opposite charge, isn't it? So there's a couple of things that I want to discuss. Number one, if you've been here with me, with Catalyst for a while, especially since maybe about the spring, then you know that this is the time we've been prepping for, right? This is not new, and now we're here, right? September, October, even into November and December with eclipse season, because we're going to have a full moon lunar eclipse in November that is going to give us a preview of when the lunar nodal axis shifts to Taurus and Scorpio. And that's why this weekend I think is really important to pay attention to, because the moon will be in Scorpio, because Venus is now starting her transit of Scorpio. When K2 or the south nodes shift to Scorpio, it's going to be very important that we are very aware of what Scorpio means, right? The symbolic representation, the archetypal experience of Scorpio, how it relates to the depth of feeling, the power of symbolism that's embedded in Scorpio in the 8th house, and how that is where we're coming away from. And when we head towards Taurus, especially with this lunar eclipse that'll be in the moon will be in late Taurus, right? The sun will be in late Scorpio. This is in conjunction with the Pleiades, right? And this is why I've been talking about this Pleiadian revival that's coming, right? And you don't have to even buy into the starseed phenomenon. You don't have to buy into ETs as actual entities. You can use these as archetypal representations of different parts of us. I've often thought about how maybe the starseed phenomenon, although I personally have my own view about it. But one thing that I have thought about is how the psyche has developed it as an archetype as part of our collective evolution, right? Because it's all symbolic language. That's all astrology is. That's all tarot is. And if you ever thought about why symbolism will be their downfall, it's because we all figure out that symbolism is the language that we all manifest from. right? And that is a big part of the Scorpio archetype. So I want to bring attention to this right now because the moon is going to be in Scorpio this whole weekend, especially tomorrow. It's a really, really potent day tomorrow in the United States on 9/11. So to have the moon in Scorpio and in opposition to Uranus tomorrow is going to really bring some stuff up to the surface. We have some fixed star energy with our asteroid goddesses too that I'm going to go over. So we know that we've been prepping for this time now, okay? And like I said, if you've been here for a while, you know this. We've been talking about it since the spring equinox, that this is the time, right? These are fixed points in time. These are nodal axis points that are represented by the sacred geometry of the cosmos, right? There's no changing this. It's really about how we experience the ride in the unfolding of this fractal reality that is where that makes a difference, right? We're all going to the same place, right? There's only one timeline for humanity at this point, and they know it, we know it, and everything that you're seeing right now is mitigation. You know, I saw somebody earlier today on a message board that was made a comment about how, you know, they were wondering when the next astrological transit, what was going to be their final point. The final point for the 0.1% of the controllers on the planet, right, that are trying to consolidate everything and control it all. And my first thought was, well, it's already happened. There are no more, right? The Saturn-Pluto conjunction in January 2020 was that point. Everything that has transpired since then has been mitigation. It's already over. Okay. And right now we are just unfolding with the process. And again, how we get there, how we experience it is up to our personal choices, right? How we experience it along the way. But it's already been done, right? The timeline, no matter how many variables we have put into the looking glass, it comes to one singular place. This is what nothing can stop what is coming means. Nothing can stop it. This is a fixed point, a 0 point, the event horizon. And if you're not familiar with that term, it is the point where nothing can escape from the gravity of the black hole. There is one timeline. There's no shifting timelines. There is no resonating at a higher timeline necessarily. There's one timeline that we're all going on if we are still here. And it's about how we experience that as we go along, okay? So I feel very strongly about this because I think that there has been a lot of misrepresentation about this concept in order to keep people focused on the end goal here and how we all get there together. But this is the time frame now. September, October, November, into December is the time frame. And when the nodes shift in January and February into Taurus and Scorpio, it's going to be a whole new ball game, and we are going to be moving towards a much more earth-oriented, much more grounded type of reality. And when I say Pleiadian revival, it is because the Pleiadian nature and the star seeds in particular are the ones who hold the resonance and the key to that open heart chakra experience. And what is an open heart chakra other than a very strong toroidal field around us? And you need to have both poles open and activated and moving in unison with each other, in and out, in order for that field to be very strong. Okay, so this weekend is going to give us a little bit of insight based on the moon's transit and of course Venus moving into Scorpio. She is not happy here. This is not a happy place for the goddess of love and sensitivity, because who wants to feel into the depth of the darkness? Right? It's very difficult. But if you've been doing your work and you haven't been shunning it away and you've been looking at it right in the face and saying, thank you very much, I will take this too and incorporate it into my entire integrated experience, then it's going to be okay. It's not that it won't be challenging. It will definitely be challenging. And for every quantum leap that we make, there is a response that will do its best to, again, mitigate that and to, stifle it as much as possible. But it's been over, right? It's been over. So How we experience it is up to us. And there is a difference between not feeding the fear and getting and being utilized at a subconscious level to to enact certain behaviors or choices that work against your own self-interest, right? There's a difference between that and just not acknowledging the very real impact that is happening to very real people around us, okay? So that's also something to consider. One thing I wanted to also mention too about stellar physics now, because we talked about this yesterday, and then we'll get on to pure astrology, okay? Pure language, pure symbolic language, right? The power of symbols. So Scorpio. When it comes to stellar physics and solar wind, so I want to clarify a couple things. Number one, solar wind is different than CMEs, right? CMEs are coronal mass ejections, and forgive me if you know this, just bear with me here. Take it as a review. Solar wind is really just the movement of the radiation from the sun, and it comes in certainly stronger form when there are sunspots and flares, right, that happen as a result of sunspots. And what are those? That's just the magnetic field around the sun is disjointed in some way, and then when it finally balances itself out, it kind of bursts forward or bursts out, right? So solar wind is just the movement of the radiation from the sun. Certainly has an impact. It had an impact over the last 2 days. You could see it, you could feel it. CMEs, or coronal mass ejections, are the ejection of plasma particles. They move much faster. They have a much higher energy content, and they have a much stronger impact on us, right? The CMEs are very strong, and they are shooting plasma particles at us, or whatever direction they're released from. Now, there was a lot of CMEs that were released from the sun over the last couple days. So far, they've missed all of us. So all of the rigmarole around it is really just getting people all worked up for no reason. And if you go to Suspicious Observers, Ben is really great at explaining it, and you know that it really wasn't much because he was pretty blasé about it. He's like, nothing has really made an impact, especially not the CMEs. So that's something to keep in mind too, that even that type of information is utilized to keep people in this fear script, right? Which is why it's so important that you discover and you educate yourself and you trust your own intuition based on the facts and the empirical data that you're taking in from multiple sources, right? When you start to see multiple sources not necessarily agree with each other, and then you find out where they're coming from, where their funding is, what is their benefit to, you get a lot more clicks and subscriptions, and you get a lot more traffic when you're constantly like, solar flare, right? And not to say that this isn't important. It's very important to understand what this all means. So coronal mass ejection of plasma, moves at a very high speed. Solar wind is the movement of the radiation from the solar flares that erupt from the sun. Sunspots are when those magnetic tangles are happening, and there's quite a lot of them right now. And we should always be looking and paying attention. But the CMEs, they all missed us, right? There wasn't that much of an eruption. There were eruptions, but there wasn't that much impact on us. And even the solar wind that came in, eventually the Earth's magnetic field bolstered itself for a brief amount of time and really took a lot of the brunt of the solar wind, right? And so the magnetic field is certainly doing something, but as it weakens in preparation for the magnetic flip, it makes us a lot more vulnerable. And there have been CMEs this year that if they had been facing towards this planet, it would have been over, right? Total grid shutdown, right? We go back to the Bronze Age because nothing works. All electronics are rendered inert at that point. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify a couple things around that. If I'm going to be speaking on it, at the very least, I want to be able to accurately report on some of these things. So again, Suspicious Observers, their YouTube channel is amazing. There's updates every day, and it's about solar weather. It's about the research papers that are covering all of these topics. And the disaster playlist is fantastic, right? It's so full full of information and shows the cyclical nature of these solar events and the magnetic changes and what kind of impact it has. And not living in fear, but being prepared. And it's very likely that nothing can stop what is coming. What is this type of event? And there's no amount of technology that's going to do anything about it, right? And so mitigation, right? It's just mitigation at this point. So anyway, let's get right into the astrology. I'm going to check in with the chat real quick and see if there's anything going on. Okay. I probably lost people on my rant. Okay, guys, so let's look at today's astrology and get into this process. Thank you for being patient. I know I'm a little late today. I just wanted to make sure that everything took the time to really draw out what was going on here. So we're looking at, this is not today. Today is this day. All right, today is the 10th of September, 2021, and our moon now is in Scorpio. Now, before that happened, earlier today, this morning, really, late last night, early this morning, however you want to look at, the moon and Venus met each other at the very last degrees of Libra. This was a really powerful moment, right? Because the last degree of any sign is certainly this mastery level of the archetypal representation of that sign. And we talk about Libra, we're talking about the balance of the scales, the perfect form, the application of our knowledge, right? Libra is an air sign, application of knowledge of how to find balance in in a dualistic system of the scales, right? It does set up the precondition that there are two sides that need to be balanced, like a seesaw in some ways, or the scales of justice, any kind of scale. So Venus, being the ruler of Libra, also reaching this moment of perfection, this moment of mastery, and there's something to be said here for this very end of Libra, where the true philosopher really understands, because they take in both sides and they've experienced both sides. And that's how you come to real understanding. Just like in Sagittarius, that real understanding is the essence of alchemical transmutation. In Libra, it's still very much a knowledge-based endeavor, right? We are applying our knowledge and our mental skills in order to find that balance. So Venus here at this point is highly sensitive to what this is and highly sensitive to what it means to understand balance. And the moon meeting her at the same time also brought that sensitivity into a feeling-based experience, right, within us, an intuitive sense. And so especially in the dream state, these two meeting each other like this overnight, potentially, if you were in fact sleeping. And I don't know, I'm curious if anybody else is having this experience, but at this point, sleep and awake are they don't even really matter anymore. They're not that distinctly different anymore. I'm certainly sleeping and I'm well rested in a physical way, but there doesn't see the veil appears to be, at least to me, very thin at this point, right? Where I go to sleep and what is transpiring in that state is just seamlessly connected to what's happening in the waking state. Now, one area is more symbolic than the other, meaning that in the subconscious realm, while you're sleeping, the language is much more symbolic than what we are used to in the waking experience. But that is becoming even more. That's just becoming more, there's less there to separate those two realms. And I'm just curious if anybody else is having that experience. Anyway, so overnight you have the moon meeting Venus and really bringing that understanding not only to our sensitivity to a material realm, right, and applying our knowledge to be like, this is what it feels like, but also this is what it feels like inside our intuition, our gut. We're like, yes, okay, this is what true understanding actually is. Which is an important place to be before we go into Scorpio, because at that point you're getting on the tour bus to hell and we're all going together. So we're going to go through this process today. So the moon does move into Scorpio this morning, and then its first real aspect is this quincunx here, this green line with Rahu, or the North Node, where we are headed. And where we are headed right now, the direction that we're being pulled on a soul level in order to evolve, is very much about the desire to reach beyond an established form. When we're talking about Gemini, we do know that there are two aspects that are polarized, right, in our minds, in our immediate reality, in our conceptualization of reality. That's Gemini. There is distinctly the past and the tradition and the future and where we are headed. And they are, in our minds, distinctly different, but they are one and the same when you look at it in the bigger picture. This quincunx here is very fascinating to me because where the moon is, it represents how absolutely institutionalized and stable these symbols are in order to provide some kind of cohesion in our own society, in our relationships. Now remember, Scorpio in the 8th house, we are talking now about the shared resources of a relational experience. Now it can be with another person individually, it can be in a group, it can be in a family, it can be in a collective or community sense. But there's an inertia of all institutionalized procedures and a stability that this part of Scorpio really represents because it holds us together, and it is the recognized and shared symbolic representation of our relationships to each other that can be kind of like like a rocky, like the shoreline of a beach, or a shoreline, like a rocky shoreline, and it's like the waves and the sea will go against it and go against it. And yeah, over a long period of time, if it's consistent, maybe it'll make some change. But in the short term, there's no amount of change that's going to be brought about as the result of the pounding of the sea, right? And so while we are being drawn on some soul level to really reach beyond what is already established, to really reach beyond that which has been an imbalance of privilege on some level, or even just an imbalance in our own minds, where we find this need to adjust ourselves, and the real opportunity to transmute here is that within each of us. Now, let me tell you, the moon in Scorpio is a really difficult position because there's no containment for the moon. The moon wants to be in Cancer, right? It wants to have that protection and that barrier to hold the waters. Now, in Scorpio, the tendency, or the real the tendency and the danger is that you just sink to the depths of the abyss emotionally, right? And in your own subconscious, and you never can really get back out or see the light. And that's a real dangerous place to be. Now, if you have a moon in Scorpio, like I do, then you are already calibrated for this. Now, it tends to make you very brooding and moody and intense emotionally, but it also allows you to sink into those spaces and be very adept at being there. So, but again, it's about the connection and the collective energy that is created in a relationship of any kind that Scorpio represents. So there's an inertia there. It's something that's very stable, but it's not changed very easily. And this again is the power of our subconscious, the power of our symbolism, and the adjustment that needs to be made is that on some soul level here, we are reaching towards a place that is trying to get us to actually be unstable, right? To initiate instability in order to reach beyond what is established. So right there, we see this opportunity to transmute this energy, to adjust ourselves in what seems like two aspects that aren't going to fit together. The moon comes into a square with Saturn today as well, right? This fixed square, fixed water of Scorpio, fixed air of Aquarius. It comes into a square. And again, we are certainly finding within us the scaffolding or the another institutionalized and very formalized formalized set of examples of where we want to go, who we want to be, the future of humanity, right? Aquarius, the future of humanity, of an awakened collective of people, right? Of sovereign individuals who come together and create the highest version of a collective. And the dark side of Aquarius is certainly the hive mind, where you don't even have individuality. It's just being programmed into you. And that has been happening. So Saturn, even in its retrograde now, is starting to, and well, hasn't starting to, it has been really setting the foundation and setting some sort of structure around where it is that we want to go. And each of us has been addressing this and feeling it out and working with this within ourselves in its retrograde. Now, the square here with the moon in Scorpio is really going to challenge us, because we're going to feel this tendency, we're going to feel a very strong urge to really just be totally open to what is, right? We want to be like a calm lake and bathed in the moonlight, where the moon, representing our subconscious, is being reflected off of the still waters that run deep. And it's a quiet openness to being inspired to higher inspiration, which seems counterintuitive when you think about how deep and dark Scorpio is. But it's the still waters of Scorpio that allow for a reflection of what is usually hidden within us and is not often reflected back to us. The square to Saturn is that it is, for as much as it's providing a scaffolding and a backbone, it also isn't leaving a lot of, it's not leaving a lot of room to be inspired intuitively or emotionally or in our feelings. And so the square here today is going to kind of disturb the waters a little bit. It's going to make it a little bit more difficult to, allow for this inspiration to come through being quiet, because it's going to be like, no, this is where we're going. And these are the examples of the type of people and situations and organizations that are our future, right? And we want to leave ourselves open, at least briefly, to being inspired about ourselves, right? What's going on within us, right? Instead of constantly reflecting back or constantly relying on this structure within us, because it's not to say that we need this backbone, we need this scaffolding on some level, and Saturn in its retrograde is actually providing the chance to really build off of this. But if we are again, it goes back to like the inertia of these situations, and if we want to move past that, we have to allow ourselves to be inspired by just quieting ourselves, right? Still waters run deep. We want to be inspired because we get to see what is within us, as opposed to just, building off of these wax figures that are like, this is the perfect version of where we're going. Not to say that that's not important, but we also need to trust our gut. So this square is actually going to work in our favor. Now, right after that is where Venus enters Scorpio as well. And so this is when it starts to get very real, right? This is where we can't turn away from the sensitivity to the depth of the experience. And it's going to be like this as Venus moves through Scorpio over the next couple of weeks. Now, the moon is in a quincunx today as well to asteroid Ceres. Now, is now in conjunction, you don't see it here, but over here with Aldebaran, right? Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, or in the left shoulder of the bull. Aldebaran is one of the fixed royal stars. It's related to Archangel Michael. It's about success through integrity. Ceres is the goddess of agriculture and the grain and what sustains us. She is the representation of Gaia. And the seasonal aspect of Gaia, right? The aspect that provides and nourishes us. She has, this asteroid now in conjunction not only with Aldebaran, is now in a position where new things are going to be opened up. So again, the earth, we've talked about this so many times, to be able to connect in very energetically and directly to the planet herself, because she is going to guide us through and walk us through this process. And it's going to be our connection to the planet directly that is going to allow us to know where to go, know where to be protected, be cared for, be nourished, right? And we can start to see that the usual systems that we have relied on for those types of things are going to start falling away for whatever reason, right? Different reasons. And we relying on the planet to sustain us in the different ways that she's naturally able to do so. These are going to open up. New opportunities are going to open up in this realm, okay? Now, where we find ourselves in that quincunx again, right? Quincunx is, this is going to be a very interesting connection, because on the surface, the Sabian symbol here for the moon in Scorpio is like, camaraderie and people coming together in fellowship, right? And the overtones of human relationship. But you have to remember that Scorpio, it's all about what it's just because it's fellowship and camaraderie doesn't mean it's for the highest good. You understand what I mean here, right? People coming together based on a similar experience of work or community doesn't necessarily mean it's of the highest, okay? And so while people are coming together and you're feeling that you want to find this group of people that you have relied upon, it's a fellowship supper, right? And so you have this idea that it's a shared meal, it's a shared experience, that you're gaining sustenance from the connection from each other. And there's an urge, right? This is the thing about the moon, right? We're kind of driven towards these things in the moon because it's our subconscious. It's our subconscious directing us. The quincunx here to asteroid Ceres, where we're, again, transmuting these two aspects that don't seem to fit together, right? They're a square peg in a round hole, is that Ceres is showing us that it's through the connection to the planet herself, through the natural means and the new opportunities that are opening as a result of whatever is happening, right? New experiences, new lands, a pioneering opportunity in the realm of, sustainable communities, organic farming, being able to gather what you need from the natural environment. It's being, there's new opportunities for this that are coming, but the quincunx here, the adjustment that will be made is that we kind of emotionally and, there's this drive to continue to find this nourishment from the people that we have already that we've already identified as part of our community. And I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out and why. And on the surface, it seems like it shouldn't be in a quincunx, but Gemini is about the mind and the conceptualization of reality and our ability to interact with the immediate environment. Whereas Scorpio is about relying on the shared resources of our community. And if that is falling away, or if there's something rotten at the root of that, then yeah, there's going to be a need to adjust ourselves in that moment and see that new opportunities are presenting themselves in this realm. So as we move through today, the same kind of quincunx comes along, because then the moon is in a quincunx to Chiron retrograde. And again, ritualized displays of power, ritualized displays of prestige that the moon in Scorpio, because again, it's about the shared resources. And eventually you get to a point where humanity or the group or whatever is trying to make sense of what it means to be in communion or in cooperation and to create resources together. And it naturally will create a hierarchy. And so again, we're going to be feeling into this hierarchy. Maybe we're experiencing some sort of ritualized display of power in this moment, whereas Chiron is consistently triggering our wounding of shame and guilt about who we are at a very basic level, and repolarizing ourselves internally and subjectively when it comes to what is natural law and what is human law. And the thing about Scorpio is that the laws start to be created based on the human interaction. Right? And then when you get into Sagittarius, which we will over, by the time we get to Sunday into Monday, our moon will be in Sagittarius. This is where the spirit of the law is created, because you take the resources from your communal relationships and utilize it to start building collective paradigms, collective belief systems. Where down in Gemini and Taurus, it's much more about the individual having a relationship with the environment, right? And the resources that are already here. So this quincunx, again, with the moon in Scorpio and Chiron in Aries, this is by tonight. You can see here, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, whereas we are feeling this ritualized display of power. Maybe this symbolic representation of the hierarchy is being presented to us. Maybe we're feeling out. Maybe we're having a direct experience of it. But what it's also doing is giving us an opportunity to transmute this energy, especially around the wounding of self, that is just like, wait a minute. These laws of humanity are built out of prior relationships that have created belief systems, but at the same time, I'm feeling like there is natural law here. And now, not only am I repolarized within myself and my subjective experience, it's also triggering all of this, like, guilt and shame about who I am. And really bringing the victim savior narrative right up to the surface. Okay, so interesting ways to make sense of today. Also, too, I want to show that Mercury is in a quincunx with Uranus. That happened yesterday. And one thing that I didn't mention, I can't believe this flew by me, but it happens, is on the new moon on the 6th. That was when Mercury entered its pre-retrograde shadow. And what that means is that it crossed the degree that it's going to retrograde back to when it starts its retrograde. Mercury starts its retrograde at the end of September on the 27th, right? So it's going to retrograde back to 10 to 11 degrees Libra, which is where it was at on the new moon. So there's something to be said for that particular degree in general, which really actually has a lot to do with the bottleneck that often exists when we have accumulated a lot of knowledge and we're trying to transmit it or instruct it to others, and how you take all of this knowledge and able to actually give it to another generation of people that are relating to reality in a completely different way. So again, transfiguration comes into the picture, but it's about the transmission and instruction of information. And with Mercury, this is about how we conceptualize information, how we communicate information. So we're going to go back to that spot at the new moon where Mercury was in its retrograde. And that's going to be sometime in October. So that's something to keep an eye out for. I just wanted to draw attention to that. Now, the sun today is also going to be in an opposition to Pallas Athena, which was the goddess of strategy, wisdom, in war, and in an opposition. Because now that the sun is getting close to the last decan or the last 10 degrees of Virgo, the focus is going to start coming to a training. We're training ourselves, educating ourselves, disciplining ourselves, really following this path of discipleship and devotion and service. And then we start to learn how to engage and initiate that within a group setting, where we're not competing with each other, but we are emulating each other and trying to all get to the same place. There's a totalization of intent and purpose that the last 10 degrees of Virgo really sets us up for. Now, in opposition to Pallas Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy, who is in its retrograde in Pisces, right? Which is really about surrendering to the infinite ocean of potential, right? Surrendering back to source and being inspired from that place, right? Letting it all go, the hanged man. and having that be a strategy that we can employ within us and to bring forward. The opposition is important to pay attention to because it's going to feel really similar to the T-square that we're going to see. I'll just show you really quick. When the moon comes into Sagittarius and is in a square to the Virgo sun, you see right here this T-square. The sun and Neptune in Pisces will be in opposition, and it's going to be the moon in Sag that's going to provide the release of this tension, right? We don't have the release of this tension when the sun is just in an opposition to Pallas Athena. So we need to find the fulcrum here, right? Where we're expressing ourselves, we're finding our creative expression and our passion through this working together, right? Each of us working on ourselves in preparation for working together. Whereas Pallas Athena is the goddess of strategy, reminding us that there is something to be said for releasing and allowing ourselves to be inspired and infused in some ways with some sort of spiritual knowledge and spiritual inspiration that we can't get necessarily from our own self. We have to release into divine source, into God, and be inspired that way. So this opposition by the end of today is going to give us an opportunity to find some balance between these two aspects. It's not just one where we just let go and we're like, I'm not going to do anything, but we also don't want to be so firmly focused on what am I doing for myself without allowing ourselves to surrender to the much bigger picture here, which is God's plan and God's will, right? The will of divine source, the collective energy that if we get so hyper-focused on what we're doing in our little sphere of reality here. And remember, the sun is the rebirth of our ego consciousness. So we don't want to get so hyper-fixated on that we completely let go of the opportunity and the strategy really within us to be inspired. And, if you remember the muse from the reading a couple days ago, the muse, right? The inspiration that comes from your imagination, from your connection to source, that when you remember Virgo is ruled by Mercury, right? It's very analytical. So there's a point here where we have to release the analysis and the movement of the mind and this really meticulous energy and allow ourselves to be inspired creatively and artistically as well. And there's a strategy to that. So as we move into 9/11, okay? All right, this is going to be, there's actually not a ton of aspects on this day, but the things that are really important, the things that are happening are very important. Number one, the moon in Scorpio will be in an opposition, as you see here, to Uranus in Taurus, okay? So this, there's a future-oriented growth here as the Scorpio archetype is moving from the first half to the second half. Right? There is a sense here that we're like children taking the first steps in the development of a mind that wants to be attuned to higher levels, right? That's the thing about Scorpio. This is the real power here, is that if we go into these realms and really see what's going on down here, I mean, we've talked about this so many times, the seed of your actual creative potential is in your subconscious. It's underneath. And Scorpio is about going into that realm and integrating it and to be a whole person on your individuation process. But you have to be willing to see what otherwise is usually hidden, because what happens is it's manipulated by people who know how to utilize symbolism and ritual and all kinds of other stimuli to activate your subconscious, right? And this is what we've all of us, right? All of us, doesn't matter how long you think you've been awake, we all are subjected to this and have been for a long time. And it's about waking up to it so then we see through it. But we have to do this work ourselves, because if we don't know what our own shortcomings and the trauma that we have, if we don't know what our triggers are in our subconscious, then we are just opening ourselves up to have that be utilized by somebody else's agenda, right? This is not new to most people. Now, the moon, like I said, in opposition to Uranus in this moment is tomorrow is we're kind of on these first steps. We're feeling it within us. We're like, oh, okay. Because today is really going to set the tone for coming to this awareness. And we're about to kind of take a step over this threshold of, these early steps into like a future oriented growth. Now, the opposition to Uranus is going to be something a lot more difficult to manage. And I really, you know how Uranus is, right? These are radical reorientations and almost forced individuation, right? These are things that happen very drastically. It is the agent of transformation, right? In the chart, Uranus is what kind of triggers your transformation, and then Pluto is the real power of it. And we're talking about Scorpio. This is the realm of Pluto. So this opposition is in some ways an incredible opportunity to harness this energy, right? Because we want to find the balance. We want to start moving towards we want to start taking the steps and moving towards and really embodying what it will take to start to awaken to what is otherwise hidden within us. But the opposition to Uranus is that it will challenge us as things become radically reoriented in our material world in Taurus, especially within us, right? Within us, in our personal reality, in our bodies, in our resources, in the physical reality around us. Now, this will challenge us. So just be aware. I mean, it seems so predictable to have some sort of event on 9/11 to trigger people or whatever. It seems predictable, right? But at the same time, it's kind of in the cosmology, in the sacred geometry of the stars and the everything in the sky above us and this experience. It's kind of poised for this. Okay, so be aware of that. The moon is going to trine Pallas. So as the sun was in opposition, now the moon comes along and forms a trine, which is something that we don't even have to really do anything. They're just going to support each other very strongly. And again, this is going to get tricky because it really depends on what you are allowing into your experience, because this degree of the moon in Scorpio is like a parrot just repeating, right? It's just repeating what is said, right? You're channeling, and what and who you're channeling, it's going to get tricky. It's going to get very tricky. And the fact that it's in a trine to Pallas Athena, right? These two are going to be very connected to each other. What you're receiving, what is the master instructing to the disciple in a seamless way? It really, really depends on who and what you are identifying as your master. And that is what's going to come through. It's going to be tricky. Very, very tricky. And that opposition with Uranus beforehand is going to happen overnight. It's going to happen probably in the dream state. So be aware of these disruptions and what it's going to set up, because what you allow to come through is going to be directly related to that, right? Because that's the thing about Uranus. It's not comfortable. It's usually very disruptive. But the awakening process that stems from it is very powerful as well. So we see the moon here, and then it comes into a sextile with the sun, right? There's that 60-degree angle that references an investment on our part, right? These two aspects that are harmonious. It's the Star of David, right? Where they are brought together in an intentional investment in order to come together and to make the most of that harmonization. And again, the sun at this point is bringing us to, again, linking our consciousness and our energies with others in order to reach a goal safely, right? It's like a caravan. Everybody's together, and we're cooperating together. And each of us is in our own little vehicle doing what, making sure that our vehicle's running properly, but we're also in a caravan of people, and we're linking ourselves together. And this sextile with the moon is really going to help us in this moment when it's possible that there's something coming in order to break up that caravan. And the moon at that moment is drawing away these curtains and showing the path ahead, right? A sacred path ahead. And it's unknown, right? We're going to have to plunge into the unknown, but it will be a type of revelation to our consciousness of what lies beyond dualistic knowledge. And if we can see that for what it is and feel it for what it is, we can apply that to where the sun is, and we can actually get somewhere, right? We can protect each other. We can go into new territory. And remember, that's where asteroid Ceres is in this degree of Gemini, in conjunction with Aldebaran, right? The Archangel Michael. So there's protection and there's a sense of pioneering and going into new territory. And I think this is some of the most difficult work for a lot of people right now, because they want to go back, and there is no going back. Why? Because we've never been free, right? So why go back? And when people start to realize that there's nothing of value as much as going forward into true freedom and sovereignty, then people will be much more apt to plunge ahead into the unknown. And if we're all together and we're linked together, this is going to make it a lot easier. And so if you are ready to plunge ahead into the unknown, if you've known that we're not going back, right? If you've known for a long time that we're not going back, if you're aware that none of what we've experienced has ever been true freedom, and you're like, fuck that shit, let's go. Like, you can be of real help and comfort and guidance for other people that are kind of still like, oh my God, and realize that, yeah, we're going to plunge ahead into the unknown. But what has happened is that the sea has parted, the curtains have opened, and we see that there is a pathway that we can go all together. This is a really important moment to have on 9/11. Then the moon is going to trine. The moon is going to come into a trine with Neptune. And Neptune's been sitting at this position now, this degree, for just a little while. It's been fairly recent, where it's time now to take this mandate from the top of the mountain and apply it to real life. And it just depends on what mandate you are associating with that is going to make the difference about what you do with it, right? So we see that there are mandates coming down from the top a lot right now. So if that's the mandate you are identifying with, then yeah, you're going to apply that in a very specific way. If you are seeing the mandate from a much higher, like the highest source, and bringing this peak experience down into reality, well, then that's going to be what you bring onto the ground. It's like Moses coming down from the mountain and being like, I have the tablets, right? It's a very distinct, it's very much spelled out, it's in a physical form, but there was a time where he went up and received this transmission, where there's inspiration, this direct communique, this mandate from God, and brought it down to the people. So it depends on which mandate. And with the fact that Neptune is retrograde still, there's no illusions about this. The fog is clear right now. It's not going to stay this way, because Neptune will station direct later in the year. Not until 2022, but early 2022. And then the fog machine is going to turn back on again. So we've been very blessed to have clarity around these issues right now. So the moon in a trine, this water trine, it's going to give us an outlet for what otherwise may be a very aggressive tendency, right? Because that's the other thing about Scorpio, is when you go into these realms, you have to deal with the deep instinct of being a physical being, right? And so society gives release vows for this, right? Through ritual, right? Certain ritual allows for this. The Sabian symbol is duck hunters, right? Is the ritual on a societal level that allows those instinctual urges to come out in a very socially acceptable way. Now, if you don't think hunting is socially acceptable, I guess that's not going to apply to you directly, but utilize that as a symbolic reference here, that there is an identification. And so this, again, there will be a direct emotional and feeling based ability to channel this aggression based on the mandate coming down. So again, you can already tell that this It has all to do with choice. What is the mandate you're following? How are you applying it to real life? And then the moon in Scorpio is going to give you an avenue to express it in a socially acceptable way. Okay, this can go, you already can tell that this can go one way or the other. So where are you going to find, what is your choice? What are you going to allow to move through you? Whose mandate is that you're going to bring into reality? And the moon in Scorpio is going to give you a seamless, direct release of your aggressive instincts along this line. So it can be a really powerful, flow. Either way, it's going to be powerful. Just what you choose to do. Oh man, it's not easy to have 9/11 be with this moon in Scorpio. I feel like this is going to be a very big challenge. So let's see here. Where am I at? So we're still on the 11th here, the trine, the Neptune, and then the moon comes and has a square with Jupiter in Aquarius. Jupiter is still retrograde, and at the same time is going to have a sextile with Pluto, right? With Pluto in Capricorn. So Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio. So there is this very distinct connection here, but also a square. Now, this position of the moon, as we get into late Scorpio, is when you start to really see what is going on, right? These last couple degrees of any sign, but specifically Scorpio, is when you get X-ray vision, right? You see down into the structural basis of things deeper than you normally would see. Now, the square here to Jupiter is going to be very painful, right? But it's going to be an incredible point of growth, because we are going to have to transmute the energies emotionally of what we feel when we see right into what's going on. Okay. This is intense. Now, the fact that it's in a sextile with Pluto, right? That 60-degree angle, you see the blue line right here. We can invest these energies into each other. When we see what is going on down to a much deeper level, it allows us to, it will allow us to invest that and to, find the harmony with what Pluto represents, which is the destruction, right? The death of the institutions and the false matrix. It's not even false, it just is, right? And it's going away, right? And that's what happened when Saturn and Pluto came together in January 2020 in Capricorn, just like a degree or two away from this, right? In conjunction with this point, right? So it's already been put into motion with that conjunction in January 2020. And so Pluto in its retrograde has been pulling away all of the threads within us that we have relied upon culturally and traditionally and socially, which is why it's so difficult for people to really let go, because you are, their entire reality is falling apart around them. If you can see the deeper structures of all of this, then you can apply that to where Pluto is and what it's doing, and you are able to align with that situation by seeing the deeper aspects within yourself of what's happening. The square to Jupiter, because Jupiter is expanding the space within us in order to really transmute, and advocating for that, this transmutation of emotional energies. But the square here, right? This is fixed air and fixed water. It's one thing to do it from your mind. It's another thing to see things and feel the depth of the experience when you are seeing way deeper, right? You got X-ray vision and you're like, oh, and it's not just seeing it, it's feeling it too. This is going to be very difficult, right? And our ability to invest ourselves into the destruction process. That death card came up so many times this week. I mean, it's really important that we embrace that as part of this process, so that we can have gratitude for it, that we can honor the process, that we can see that it is always the precursor to metamorphosis and rebirth, right? But it's going to be our ability to see that and to feel that within us, the depth of it, in order to really be able to get the most out of where Pluto is without losing our minds. And here's our minds right here, Jupiter and Aquarius, right? There's our minds. We have there's a real chance of losing it right here with this square. So that's something that, it's going to be an interesting and very powerful weekend. And I really hope people have heeded as much of the advice to be aware and prepared and to feel it all and to utilize that darkness energy as a transmutational opportunity, as opposed to putting your head in the sand and pretending that it's not there, or to, feed it with your own, feed it because your subconscious is being triggered by imagery constantly. So, which is definitely, serving somebody else's purpose other than our own. So when we go into the 12th, that's Sunday, we see that the moon now has moved into Sagittarius. There you are. So the moon has moved into Sagittarius. But before it does that, it is we'll go back here. It's in a sextile, that 60-degree angle. That is an opportunity to invest in order to reap the benefits of the harmony between water and earth, for instance, right? Both feminine properties of water and earth, those elementals. What is it? A sextile to Mars. Mars is getting to the last degrees of Virgo. This is important because this is where you really harness the power of Virgo. And Mars is like the sacred warrior of service and devotion, right? It's like, it's going to be so intent on what he's doing that everything else around him just fall away. And we know that, anybody that's ever been in that type of position knows exactly what I'm talking about, where it all falls away and you just have this tunnel vision, right? In order to get to your goal, whatever it is. And in this case, it's very much spiritual, right? It's very much about your path of devotion and service. Now, when Mars moves into Libra, Mars, that power is going out the window, right? Mars is in its detriment in Libra. It's the warrior that retires and it has to go into being a diplomat, right? It takes the wind out of the sails of Mars big time. Now, some people, this works to their advantage, right? Because it tempers what otherwise may be it depends on where Mars is in your chart, right? And what it's aspecting in your chart. So when it's in Libra, sometimes that diplomacy is exactly what's needed. You don't want it to, for instance, like if you have Mars in the second house, right, in your natal chart, your second house is your resources that you have, right, that you come in with, that are your resources. When you have Mars in the second house, it always feels like you never have anything there's no savings, right? Because it's a constant output of resources with Mars. You're always taking what you have and outputting it constantly. So imagine having Mars in Libra in your second house. It allows for a balance of that instead of a constant outputting, right? So that's an example how you can utilize that type of energy in a positive way. Now, Mars and you can see it in this way as well. When Mars moves into Libra, it's going to take all of that hot warrior fire energy and apply it to balancing a perfect form of relationship in diplomacy. And this, I think, will help a lot. And we'll get there. We're not there yet, though. What we are talking about is this sextile between a Scorpio moon at the very last degrees of Scorpio and Mars at the 29th degree of Virgo, which is about seeking knowledge and the truth, and being very aware that when you're involved in any type of revolutionary movement, right? You need to tap in. This is the failure of a lot of revolutionary movements, in my opinion. You need to tap into natural universal law, not laws, law. Or you are going to re-embody the very thing you destroyed. And you can see that playing out over and over again because it's about ego and it's about power and not about universal or natural law. So this degree of Virgo is about the seeker illuminating his or her mind with the truth. So after the crisis, that you realign your renewed consciousness with that universal law, and not just to reestablish your own ego-based power structure, which is really hard for Mars. So this is an important place for Mars to be. The sextile to this is so beautiful. The sextile of the moon at this point is by the end of Scorpio is you discover that love is, love is a principle of redemption. This is about redemption. Oh my gosh, this is so good. It's really important that we harness this, okay, within ourselves, and look for it outside of us, and speak to it. Look for the symbols, look for the representations, find the ways to embody this within our own feeling-based landscape, because this is going to really be what moves us forward in a fully sovereign, free humanity, okay? Love is a principle of redemption. Redemption is always available to us, always, right? There's never a time where you can't be redeemed. And love is the baseline for that. And so we can apply this to where Mars is like, I am looking to illuminate my mind with truth after this crisis. And it's love. It's love that's going to allow for us to align with that as the universal law, rather than going back into another power structure. This is really difficult. You can feel that people are attaching their ego to some sort of desire for control because they feel out of control. And then in the process, they want to go back and reestablish that same basic dynamic, so they can feel in control again. And this is really setting the stage for us not to do this. Please take this opportunity, right? Don't let it pass you by without harnessing it for yourself, because redemption is such a primary principle that we really need to have moving forward. And love, right? Love is the universal law. Okay. And Mars, if Mars is able to have that within when it moves into Libra, it's not going to feel disempowered. It's going to have some principle there in order to be a diplomat and to have something at the base of that. So then the moon moves into Sagittarius right after this. Oh boy. So a lot of like really big ideas and optimism and big picture. And we're like, yes, yes, yes. Or dogmatism, right? That's the other dark side of Sagittarius, total judgment, dogmatism, being very dogmatic, being very judgmental, really forcing people into the structure of your doctrine because you believe that it is the truth. Sagittarius is not the truth. Sagittarius is the union of opposites together into the creation of a new understanding. It's the friction. The fire, the friction fire is the alchemical fire that provides the catalyst for transmutation, right? So there's a lot of important, Jupiter rules Sagittarius. It's important to realize how powerful this is going to be, and to know that if you're connected to this emotionally, we all are going to be. We need to be very clear with ourselves what is the purpose of our alchemical transmutation, and what collective paradigm are we operating under. So because that's going to inform a lot about how we feel during this time. So first that's going to happen is that the moon is going to meet the south node, or K2, at 4 to 5, actually directly 4 degrees and 44 minutes of Sagittarius. Now this degree is the wise old owl. And the reason the owl is considered wise is because an owl is a predator. An owl is a nocturnal predator. An owl is able to see in the dark, right? And so the reference symbolically is that the owl sees what our conscious mind, the owl represents the ability to see what the conscious mind does not see. Right. And that's where wisdom comes from. So the moon is going to meet K2, right? She's going to meet her own south node, and we are going to have this alignment here with this poise and this wisdom to see what our conscious mind doesn't see. And it's going to be in the moon, right? Where we feel in our subconscious. this is an interesting connection. Now, it'll be in opposition to the North Node, which is where we're headed, right? We're headed in this direction, which is really, really engaging us into reaching beyond what is already established, right? Whether or not this opposition here is going to test us, and at the same time is going to give us so much perspective, right? Remember that K2 might be where we're heading away from, right? It's our past, but it provides the momentum to move forward. The tail of the dragon is the momentum, right? It is the bottom when the Kundalini releases and uncoils, right? It is still the bottom there at the base. And so the tail of the dragon is the momentum. This is going to be important, because if we have to be able to see into the areas that our conscious mind doesn't often see, and we have to be able to feel into them so that we can use that as the momentum moving forward, or moving towards our soul's karmic destiny, right? Which is to reach beyond what is already here, right? To cross over to reach beyond the veil, or reach beyond what is established. And it's really uncomfortable, and we're still in Hyades territory here, right? The Hyades starseeds, allowing expression and the experience of the moment to move through you as opposed to attaching to it. Now, we don't want to confuse this area with where we're going, of having that poise and being outside of what's happening. It's just giving us a moment to be able to embody this energy so that we don't get caught. But just remember that this is not where we are meant to be heading, okay? Where we're going is the much more disruptive, much more individualized experience of reaching beyond what is already established in our immediate environment, okay? On an individual level, right? Sagittarius is about the collective paradigm. Now, also what's happening is the moon comes into a sextile with Saturn. So it was in a square to Saturn, and now it's in a sextile to Saturn, now that we're in air and fire, right? And new stuff is being formed at the base here. This is psychic gestation. This is new elements being formed in the core of the earth, in that magma fire, right? In that magma fire underneath the surface. It's just roiling around, and new elements are being formed. And again, we can apply this directly to the scaffolding, or that crystalline structure that is giving us like a backbone in terms of where we're going. And if you want to think about this in terms of an actual crystalline structure, being that the earth is got these huge quartz deposits, right? Silicon dioxide, right? Piezoelectric effect. Not only is it able to hold incredible amounts of pressure and heat, but it also creates moves electricity as a result of that. New things are being formed under the surface. We don't see them yet. And this is why it's so important that we allow ourselves to connect to that moment with K2 of seeing what we normally don't see, and seeing it from within ourselves, feeling what that is, because we know that something new is being created, and we can apply this. We can invest this into what Saturn is providing, a foundation and a structure of where we're going for humanity, okay? When the moon moves past this point, she's going to be in an opposition to Ceres, the goddess of the grain. And again, this is the same kind of basic aspect where the moon will be in conjunction with Antares, right? The heart of the scorpion. And we're really feeling into that, in opposition to the representation of the actual Earth herself, as she is the provider and the nourisher of us, the seasons, the agriculture, the grain, so to speak, in conjunction with Aldebaran. Now, you remember that the nodes were in this exact opposition not that long ago. So we're kind of going back to that in some ways. And the moon is giving us a chance to remember what that's going to feel like, right? Reaching the heart of the scorpion again, connecting right back into the feeling based experience of that. But again, we are being new opportunities are opening, new lands are opening. So we don't want to get caught necessarily in all of that feeling, right? We want to allow ourselves to connect to it just long enough to see what we don't normally see. But if we get caught in this space, then we don't have the opportunity to move forward into new potential opportunities to pioneer forward, especially when it comes to the physical material reality and how we produce what sustains us, right? We can get really caught up in the betrayal aspect, and there's something to be said for seeing that, but there's also something to be said for getting caught there emotionally, because then we can't move forward. And I think that's gonna be it for the 12th, because then we move into the 13th, and this is where we get our first quarter square. And I'm gonna, I'll be on with our transmission as usual on Monday, so I'm not gonna go into the specifics of the rest of the week, but look at this T-square. The Sun and Neptune in that opposition to each other. We are putting on the armor of God at this point with the Sun in Virgo, and the opposition to Neptune is that we can't armor ourselves so much that we don't allow in the inspiration, right? We can't cover ourselves so much with all of this stuff, because then we don't allow in the actual direct experience of being inspired at a spiritual level from the highest source, okay? So this opposition is going to reflect that. Now, how do we release the tension? Well, this T-square with the moon in Sagittarius is how we do it. And it really does speak to this ability to, it's literally splitting the difference here, right? Where on the one hand, we are contained in some ways within a community of like-minded people who speak our language. And but we also utilize what it is that separates us, right, from everybody else that feels like an alien environment. We utilize that as something that we can offer, right? And so we don't completely cut ourselves off, but we aren't so open that we can't actually function within this reality, okay? Now, I'm speaking directly to the starseeds and the light workers, because this is, most of my audience, but this is going to be for everybody, right? I mean, these transits affect everybody. And so how this time with the moon in Sagittarius is going to give us this opportunity. What is it that makes you unique? What is it that allows you to, let's see here. Where is that? There it is. Making you, what is it that allows you to use your special background, your special skill set, your special whatever? What is it that separates you from the whole environment around you, but at the same, and allows you to maintain your own integrity in situations that don't give you any value, and keep you self-contained, but at the same time, you're offering something, right? This is how we're going to do it. There's something here about being able to be self-contained and maintain your integrity, but not being completely closed off from reality, right? You don't want to armor yourself so much that you are not in touch with what's going on, but you can't just leave yourself completely open to being taken over either. So this T-square is going to set the stage for that. And that's also at the very same time, I mean, you get the first quarter square of the sun and the moon, a crisis in action. This square right here is that crisis. How do we do that? When we don't turn, again, the square here is making it difficult and making it providing some friction between how we feel about this, and with Neptune dissolving everything, that makes it impossible to do anything but just let go. And so it's about finding that special part of yourself and how you maintain your integrity in the midst of participating in what seems like an alien environment. So that seems like enough to say about Monday, but the rest of the week, right? Let's look at the main transits here. Is that Mars is going to, like I said, Mars is going to come into Libra, excuse me. You can see here that there is a yod, right, with the moon in Capricorn, Venus in Scorpio to the North Node, right? And so that finger of God, where these two quincunxes are able to be transmuted by investing these two energies, a moon in Capricorn and Venus in Scorpio. Moon in Capricorn is going to give us some boundaries, right? It's going to give us some goal to work towards that is going to really help kind of balance out the sensitivity to the depth of the experience, right? We invest these things into each other, and then we find our transmutational property with these two quincunxes, right? To what? The North Node, which is having us reach beyond the established forms, okay? Internally and emotionally, Moon in Capricorn is going to, it's going to be serious. It's going to be formalized. We're going to have some boundaries. We're going to have some inner authority, even while we are feeling and being sensitive to that which is really difficult to be sensitive to. So that's important as well. And then as we move through the week, like I said, Mars comes into Libra. The moon is going to eventually meet Pluto during this time. The sun is coming into a quincunx with Jupiter, of course. And so again, tons of quincunxes, like these opportunities to really, really adjust ourselves. And this moment that the moon comes into a quincunx with Jupiter and then comes into a trine with Pluto, again, that flag at half mast. Do not be surprised if with the sun in that position in a trine to Pluto that we actually do see something being let go of and a recognition of its service to this process. And it could be just something within us, right? But a cultural hero, being honored is a big part of this degree that it's going to not only be in a trine to Pluto, but again, a quincunx, right, to Jupiter, that we're being challenged to transmute our emotional energies. Ooh, it's going to be worth some time to really investigate come next week. That's Wednesday the 15th. So that's important. Venus is going to come into a square with Saturn at the same degree that the moon did. The moon will be today, right? That square where we have to be willing to be open. It's different when the moon's there. It's a totally different story when it's Venus, because Venus does not like to feel uncomfortable. She doesn't like being sensitive to the darkness, right? So that square there is going to be even more palpable by next week. Let's see here. And then by the time we get to next Friday, we're going to find a quincunx with Mercury and Neptune, where, again, we're going to have to figure out how do we, in our minds, how do we find balance? How do we give ourselves what it is that we really need? But at the same time, like, how does that fit with being given from the higher source? Like, how do we make these things fit together? Well, again, we have to transmute them. What does that mean? We take the aspects that seemingly are the opposite, bring them down to their base constituent parts, bring them and use some sort of alchemical fire to catalyze a reaction that turns them into something else, turning lead into gold. That is the basis of alchemical transmutation, the Philosopher's Stone. So that's plenty of information to deal with, because we have a full moon, as you see here, in Pisces on the 20th, and that'll be a very, very distinct consummation point of everything we need to be listening for. That started with our new moon in Virgo. So guys, I'm going to leave it there. That's plenty of information to work with over the weekend. I hope everyone is doing well. If you need any energetic support, if you're interested in a reading to see how these transits impact your natal chart and what areas they're going to be in, how to maybe work consciously with them, you can book with me through catalystenergies.net. That's in the description box below. I'm also on Telegram and Facebook, so you can link to those things as well. And have a great weekend. Whatever you're getting into tomorrow on 9/11, do it with some awareness and some consciousness and some intention and some reverence, right? And just be aware of the depth of your feeling and let it move through you, right? Let it move through you. Let it show you things that you need to see. Allow yourself to feel the full experience of being a human being. And that is the best way that you can sharpen your discernment and to deepen your intuition, because your innate knows everything. It knows everything. And this weekend is going to give us an opportunity to really go very deep into these places. And we have been primed for this leading up to this point, all week, right? The density has been very, very strong. And it has, in some ways, allowed us to bolster our own pressure to push out and keep it balanced. And by doing that, we allow ourselves the stability and integrity energetically to allow ourselves to go much deeper. And when we can do that, we deepen our own connection to ourselves and to God. So with that, I'll leave you in peace. And I love you guys. I appreciate each and every one of you. And we will come back together on Monday for the Daily Medicine transmission. Take care. Bye.